You know, you can guess someone's net worth just by looking at what assets they own, because your portfolio reveals everything. The real question is, what does yours say about you? Because you see, there are 4 stages of wealth, and most people never make it past the first 2. So let's break them down stage by stage and see where you really stand. Welcome to Alux. All right, so at stage 1, it's lower class. If more than half of your net worth is tied up in your house, you're stuck in the mortgage prison. It feels safe, yeah, like I've got a home, I'm building wealth. But in reality, most people at this stage don't fully own their home. The bank does, and that's the trap. According to the Federal Reserve's distributional financial accounts, households in the bottom 50% have over half of their wealth concentrated in the primary residence. On paper, that looks like stability, but in practice, you're financially stuck. One property, one location, one local market. If real estate prices dip, so does the bulk of your wealth. If you lose your job, you still owe the bank. Even while you're living in it, that equity earns you nothing. It just sits there, locked, illiquid, and unusable. And it doesn't stop there, okay? For most families in this tier, the mortgage is still alive and draining. Every month, hundreds or thousands of dollars are funneled to the lender. That's not money growing your future, okay? That's money servicing the past. The Richmond Fed confirmed that mortgages remain the largest liability for the bottom 90% of households. Outside of the home, assets are small and pretty fragile. Maybe a car that loses value the moment it leaves the dealership. Maybe a savings account that earns less than inflation erodes. Maybe a starter retirement account worth a few thousand. But in reality, the family balance sheet is dangerously concentrated. That's why life here feels so fragile. One emergency repair, one unexpected layoff, one medical bill, and everything can collapse. Graduation from this level doesn't come from luck or a sudden promotion or chasing some hot stock. No, it comes from one thing: finishing the mortgage. As long as the bank has claim on your home, you are not free. Your monthly budget is split between survival and obligation. Clear the mortgage, and for the first time, you gain free cash flow. Think about it. If $1,200 a month no longer disappears into debt, that's $14,000 a year you can redirect somewhere more productive, into retirement accounts, into investments, into building new income streams. That cash flow shift is bigger than most people realize. It's the difference between being trapped in yesterday's bills and finally funding tomorrow's growth. Here's the brutal truth, okay? If most of your income is swallowed up by a mortgage, you're not in control. You are in mortgage prison. And the only way out is to break the chains of debt. And this level is where the majority of people live. Net worth might look respectable on paper, like $120,000, $150,000, even $200,000. But peel it back, and $100,000 of that is trapped in home equity, $10,000 in a car, $5,000 in savings, maybe $5,000 in retirement. Fragile, concentrated, immobile. This is why the bottom half of households in America, despite owning their homes, control only about 6% of total U.S. wealth. The house feels like wealth, but it isn't compounding wealth. It's just shelter with a price tag. The first real graduation is escaping this mortgage prison. Only then does your cash flow belong to you, and only then can you start building wealth that compounds instead of just standing still. And look, okay, if building and growing your wealth is something that you are working toward, and let's be honest, okay, if you're here consuming this kind of educational content, you are, well, you would absolutely value being a member of the Alux app. Inside, we not only have daily coaching sessions presented by me, but there's also expert collections on a wide range of topics designed for high achievers, entrepreneurs, and top-level management. We pay these experts their expensive fees, so you don't have to, okay? Leveling the playing field of who gets access to this kind of knowledge, which until recently was being gate-kept by the wealthy. To sweeten this deal, if you download the app and scan this QR code, you'll get 25% off the annual membership. I'll see you on the inside, but in the meantime, let's get back to business. Stage 2 is the middle class. If you've paid off your mortgage and finally own your home outright, well, congratulations, you, my friend, have graduated from the mortgage prison. This is where the middle class lives, debt-free, stable, and secure. But it's also why so many people get stuck here, okay? For the first time, you're not sending thousands to the bank every month. That cash flow is yours. The psychological weight of debt is gone. You feel safe. This is the dream most people chase: a paid-off house, a growing retirement account, and maybe some cash in the bank. But financially, the picture still has a hidden weakness. According to the Federal Reserve's distributional financial accounts, for households in the 50th to 90th percentile of wealth, housing still makes up 40 to 60% of total net worth. The home is free of debt, but it still dominates the balance sheet. The rest of the portfolio is usually retirement accounts like a 401k, IRAs, pensions. These are the second largest assets, often 20 to 30% of wealth. There's usually some cash and savings, maybe a few government bonds, but nothing aggressive. It's a portfolio designed for safety, not speed. And that's the trap of level 2. Safety feels like success. When the mortgage is gone, the family thinks they've won, but the truth is, they've just reached the midpoint. And the numbers? Well, they show why. Homes grow about 3% a year long term. Retirement accounts invested conservatively may earn 5 to 6%. That sounds fine until you compare it to markets. Equities over the long run compound at 7 to 10% annually. That gap, a few percentage points, might not sound like much, but compounded over decades, it's the difference between just keeping up with inflation and breaking into the upper class. Here's an example, all right? A household worth about $500,000 at this stage might look like $250K in a paid-off home, $150K in a retirement account, $50K in cash and bonds, and $50K in miscellaneous assets. Respectable wealth, right? But if most of that growth is at 3 to 5% per year, their trajectory is flat compared to families who allocate capital to higher growth assets. This is why middle-class families often stay middle-class, even when they're debt-free. They've eliminated risk, sure, but they've also eliminated upside. Graduation from this level requires a mindset shift. Instead of treating the home as the crown jewel of wealth, it needs to become just one piece of the puzzle. The freed-up cash flow that once went to the bank has to be redirected into growth assets, equities, index funds, and eventually business equity. But most people don't do that. They get comfortable. They pour money into renovations, a new car, vacations, slowly padding a savings account. They stop moving forward because they believe they've already arrived. This is why the bottom 90% of households, even when debt-free, rarely move higher. Their portfolios are stable, but not scalable. They play defense while the wealthy are playing offense. Stage 2 feels like security, but if you stop here, you'll never reach true freedom. The only way to graduate here is to accept that safety is not the finish line. Growth is. At stage 3, you've reached the upper class. This is where wealth starts to behave differently. The house is still there, yeah, but it no longer dominates the balance sheet. At this stage, the home might be 25 to 30% of total net worth, but the majority is now in financial assets, equities, retirement accounts, and in some cases, income properties or small business stakes. Households here usually sit between the 90th and 99th percentile of wealth. According to the Federal Reserve's distributional financial accounts, their portfolios are tilted towards stocks, mutual funds, and retirement vehicles. And this is the level where compounding finally takes over. And let's just highlight the difference here, okay? Homes grow at about 3% annually. That is steady, but it's slow. Stocks, over the long run, return closer to 7 to 10% annually. It might not sound dramatic, but over 25 years, that gap explodes, okay? Imagine you've got $300,000 in a home. At 3% annual growth, it climbs to about $628,000 in 25 years. But now imagine that same $300K in equities compounding at 8%. That turns into $2 million in that same time frame. That is why wealthy families don't stop at the house. They push their wealth into markets that can scale faster. At this level, your portfolio grows even if you stop working. Dividends roll in, retirement accounts expand, equity stakes appreciate, money compounds independently of your effort. The machine has started rolling. Just consider a household with $1 million net worth. Their breakdown might look like $300,000 in home equity, $350,000 in public equities, $250,000 in retirement accounts, and $100,000 in cash and other assets. The house is still there, but financial assets are what dominates now. That difference in composition is what allows wealth to accelerate. The strength of this level is growth, but the risk is overconfidence. Families here have seen their net worth multiply through market exposure, and it's easy to start chasing bigger wins. They buy into hot stocks, speculative real estate, or risky ventures without the systems in place to protect themselves. It's how fortunes get cut in half in a single downturn. Graduation from this level is all about identity, okay? The middle class measures success by how much debt they've eliminated. Investors at this level, well, they measure how much capital they've put to work. But to reach the next stage, you need to stop thinking like an investor in somebody else's companies and start thinking like an owner of your own. Because here's the divergence. One path leads to comfort, $1 million portfolio, a paid-off home, stability. The other path leads to the top 1%, control over businesses, systems, and scalable assets. Stage 3 is where wealth finally grows faster than you can earn it. The challenge is deciding if you'll stay a participant in the market or graduate to becoming the market itself, because that's what leads to stage 4, the 1%. Now, this is the final graduation, okay? At level 4, the entire composition of wealth flips. The home shrinks to almost nothing on the spreadsheet. For the 1%, the primary residence usually makes up less than 10% of their total wealth. The house is no longer an asset they rely on, it's a lifestyle choice, a background detail. The real engine is ownership. At this stage, wealth is dominated by equities and private business holdings. The Federal Reserve reports that the top 1% own nearly half of the corporate entities and mutual funds in the U.S. Imagine the stock market as a pie sliced in the middle. Half goes just to the 1% of people, and research shows they control roughly 80% of private business equity. Now, if that same pie represented all of the private companies in the U.S. and you split it in 10 slices, 8 of them go straight to the 1%, with the remaining 2 shared by everyone else. Take a household with $10 million in net worth. Their breakdown might look something like this, okay? $1 million in their home, 3.5 in public equities, 3.5 in private companies, and like $2 million spread across other investments. Compare that to the middle class with the same $1 million home but no ownership. The house is the same, but the story is completely different. One portfolio is capped, the other compounds at scale. The psychological shift here is from being a participant to being a controller. Investors participate in the upside of someone else's company. Owners? Well, they decide the upside of their own. That control is what separates a comfortable millionaire from the ultra-wealthy. But ownership isn't just about higher returns. It also comes with magnified risk, right? Leverage and concentration can destroy fortunes just as quickly as they're built. That's why the ultra-rich protect themselves with diversification, holding companies, trusts, and professional managers. At level 4, wealth stops being about just personal effort. It's no longer a reflection of hours worked or salaries earned. It becomes a reflection of the systems you own. Systems that employ people, serve customers, generate cash flow, and grow regardless of what you do day to day. This is the stage most people never reach, but it's also why the top 1% keep pulling away. The composition of their wealth is built on businesses and markets that compound at scale, while the rest of the population stays concentrated in homes and slow-moving savings. Each step feels like success when you reach it, right? Paying off a mortgage, filling retirement accounts, hitting 7 figures in net worth, they all feel like milestones, and they are. But they're not the end. Every stage has a ceiling. The truth is, wealth doesn't just grow in size, but it graduates in form. That's why the bottom 50% of households, even with homes, control only 6% of U.S. wealth, while the top 1% own nearly half of all the stocks and most private businesses. So, ask yourself, which level are you in right now? And more importantly, what's your graduation plan? Thanks for spending some time with us today, Aluxer. We're so glad you did. We'll catch you back here next time. Until then, take care.